The steam from the industrial dishwasher hit Maria Santos in the face as she pulled out another rack of plates. Her small hands moved quickly, sorting the clean dishes into stacks that would feed hundreds of soldiers at Fort Bragg. At 23, she had been working in the base kitchen for 2 years, sending most of her paycheck back home to her mother in El Salvador. Nobody really noticed Maria. She arrived before dawn, worked through lunch, and left after dinner service. The other kitchen staff knew her as the quiet girl who never complained, even when the lunch rush turned into chaos. The soldiers who passed through the serving line saw only another face behind the hairnets and steam trays. But Maria noticed everything. She watched how the young recruits wolfed down their food, homesick and trying to fill an empty space with mashed potatoes and meatloaf. She saw the tired faces of sergeants coming off night duty, grateful for hot coffee and fresh eggs. She understood that her work meant something, even if nobody else did. On this particular Tuesday morning, Maria was preparing vegetables for the lunch service when she overheard 2 cooks talking in hushed voices by the walk-in freezer. "Did you hear? General Morrison is coming for lunch today," whispered Jake, the head cook. 4 stars, direct from the Pentagon. The colonel is losing his mind about the menu. Maria looked up from the onions she was chopping. She had never seen a 4-star general before. Few people had. General Morrison commanded the entire 18th Airborne Corps, overseeing more than 90,000 soldiers across multiple states. "What do you want to eat?" asked Carmen, the morning prep cook. "That's the problem," Jake replied, shaking his head. "The colonel wants to order special food from downtown. Prime rib, fancy vegetables, some kind of chocolate dessert that costs $40 a plate. He wants to impress the general." Maria continued chopping, but she listened carefully. Something about this conversation bothered her, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what. "When's he coming?" Carmen asked. 12:30, right in the middle of lunch service. "The colonel wants everything perfect." Maria glanced around the kitchen. She loved this place with its industrial ovens and massive pots that could feed an army. Literally, the smell of fresh bread, the sizzle of bacon on the grill, the organized chaos of a dozen people working together to create thousands of meals every day. This was honest work, feeding people who serve their country. As the morning progressed, Maria watched the staff prepare for the general's visit. Colonel Patterson, the base commander, had visited the kitchen 3 times already, adjusting the menu and fussing over details. He was a good officer, but Maria could see the stress lines around his eyes. This visit clearly meant a lot to him. The fancy food arrived from downtown at 11:30. Prime rib that cost more than Maria made in a week. Imported vegetables that had traveled thousands of miles. A chocolate cake that looked more like artwork than dessert. Maria was assigned to prepare the vegetables for the general's table. As she worked, she thought about her own lunch, which would be leftover rice and beans from yesterday. She thought about the soldiers in the chow line, who would get standard military fare while their commanding general dined on food that cost more than their monthly pay. At 12:15, the kitchen staff lined up for a final inspection. Colonel Patterson walked down the line, checking uniforms and reviewing last-minute details. "Remember," he said, his voice tight with nervous energy, "this is General Morrison. Everything must be perfect. Absolutely perfect." Maria nodded with the others, but something in her chest felt heavy. She watched as Jake and the other senior staff carefully plated the expensive meal, arranging each element like a work of art. At 12:28, word came down that General Morrison had arrived on base. Maria could feel the tension in the kitchen ratchet up another notch. Everyone moved a little faster, spoke a little quieter. Then, at exactly 12:30, the kitchen door swung open. General Morrison entered with his aide, a young captain who looked nervous enough to faint. The general himself was exactly what Maria expected. Tall, silver-haired, with 4 stars gleaming on his uniform and ribbons covering most of his chest. His presence filled the room. But what surprised Maria was his face. Instead of the stern expression she had imagined, General Morrison looked genuinely interested as he surveyed the kitchen. His eyes took in the industrial equipment, the staff working at their stations, the controlled chaos of lunch service. Colonel Patterson, the general said, his voice carrying easily over the kitchen noise, "This is quite an operation you have here." "Thank you, sir," the colonel replied, gesturing toward the dining area. "We have your lunch ready in the private dining room. Prime rib, just as you requested." General Morrison paused. "Prime rib? I don't recall requesting anything specific." Maria saw Colonel Patterson's face flush slightly. "Well, sir, I mean, for someone of your rank." "Colonel," the general said gently, "what are the troops eating today?" "The troops, sir?" "Yes. What's on the menu for lunch service?" Colonel Patterson looked confused. "Standard fare, sir. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, dinner rolls." "That sounds perfect," General Morrison said, surprising everyone within earshot. "I'll have what they're having." Maria watched Colonel Patterson struggle to process this information. "Sir, I don't think you understand. We have prime rib specially prepared." "Colonel, I understand perfectly. I spent 32 years working my way up from second lieutenant. I've eaten more military meatloaf than any man should have to endure. But these soldiers deserve better than a commanding general who thinks he's too good to eat the same food they do." The kitchen had gone quiet. Even the dishwashers had stopped their work to listen. "But, sir," Colonel Patterson tried again, "the expense, the preparation." General Morrison held up his hand. "Colonel, how much did you spend on my lunch?" Well, approximately $200, sir." $200. The general let that number hang in the air. "For one meal. How many soldiers could eat for $200? Maria found herself nodding slightly. This was exactly what had bothered her about the whole situation. Colonel Patterson looked miserable. "Quite a few, sir." "I'll tell you exactly how many," General Morrison said. "About 40 soldiers could have a good meal for that money. 40 young men and women who are training to defend this country, and we're spending their meal budget on prime rib for one person." The general looked around the kitchen, and his eyes briefly met Maria's. She quickly looked down at her workstation, but not before she saw something in his expression that surprised her. Respect for the work being done here. "Now," General Morrison continued, "I understand you meant well, Colonel. You wanted to show respect for rank, and I appreciate that. But the best way to show respect for this uniform is to remember who I serve." "Yes, sir," Colonel Patterson said quietly. "So I'll ask again. May I please have what the troops are having for lunch?" Colonel Patterson nodded to Jake, who immediately began preparing a standard military tray. Maria watched as the head cook, clearly flustered, slopped meatloaf and mashed potatoes onto a regulation tray. But as Maria watched, she noticed something that made her stomach sink. In his nervousness, Jake was serving the general from the bottom of the meatloaf pan, where the meat had dried out. The mashed potatoes were from the batch that had been sitting under heat lamps too long. The green beans looked tired and overcooked. This wasn't how the food was supposed to look. Maria had been working in this kitchen long enough to know what good military food looked like, and this wasn't it. Jake was so nervous about serving a general that he was actually serving bad food. Maria looked at General Morrison, who was patiently waiting for his meal. This man had just made a point about eating the same food as his soldiers, about respect and sacrifice and remembering who he served. He was about to get the worst possible version of that food. Without really thinking about it, Maria stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Colonel Patterson's eyebrows shot up. Jake looked horrified that a prep cook was speaking during the general's visit. Even General Morrison turned his attention to this small woman in a stained apron. Maria felt her heart pounding, but she had gone too far to stop now. "Sir," she said, looking directly at General Morrison, "that's not how the food is supposed to look." The kitchen went dead silent. Maria could practically feel Colonel Patterson's blood pressure spiking. But she continued, "The meatloaf he's serving you, it's from the bottom of the pan. It's all dried out. And those potatoes have been sitting too long. That's not what the soldiers are eating. That's not fair to you or to them." Jake's face had gone completely white. "Maria, what do you know?" General Morrison said, holding up his hand. "Let her finish." Maria took a deep breath. This was it. She was either about to get fired or maybe, just maybe, do something right. Sir, if you really want to eat what the soldiers eat, you should get fresh meatloaf from the center of the pan, where it's still moist, and fresh potatoes, and green beans that haven't been sitting under the heat lamp all morning. The soldiers deserve good food, and so do you. For a moment that felt like an hour, nobody moved. Maria could hear her own heartbeat and the distant hum of the refrigeration units. She had just contradicted her supervisor in front of a 4-star general and the base commander. There was a very good chance she would be looking for a new job tomorrow. But General Morrison was smiling. "What's your name, soldier?" he asked. "Maria Santos, sir." "But I'm not a soldier. I'm just kitchen staff." "Just kitchen staff," the general repeated thoughtfully. "Maria, how long have you been working here?" 2 years, sir." "And you know how the food should be prepared?" "Yes, sir. I work every shift. I know what good food looks like and what bad food looks like." General Morrison nodded. "Colonel Patterson, I want you to listen very carefully to what just happened here." "Yes, sir," the colonel replied, though he looked like he wasn't sure what was coming next. This young woman just demonstrated more leadership in 30 seconds than some officers show in their entire careers. She saw something wrong. She spoke up despite the personal risk, and she did it because she cared about doing the job right. That's what we're supposed to be teaching our soldiers. Maria felt her cheeks burning. She hadn't expected this response at all. "Now," General Morrison said to Jake, "I believe Maria has some suggestions about how to properly serve lunch." Jake nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir." Under Maria's quiet direction, Jake prepared a fresh tray. The meatloaf came from the center of the pan, still steaming and moist. The mashed potatoes were freshly scooped, creamy and smooth. The green beans were bright and properly cooked. "This," Maria said as Jake finished plating, "is what the soldiers are eating." General Morrison accepted the tray. "It looks excellent." "Thank you, Maria." As the general moved toward the dining area, Maria expected everything to go back to normal. She would return to her vegetables, finish her shift, and try to figure out if she still had a job. But Colonel Patterson wasn't finished with her. "Santos," he called out. Maria turned, her stomach nodding. Here it came. "Sir, I want to see you in my office at the end of your shift." "Yes, sir." As the colonel left to join General Morrison for lunch, the kitchen slowly returned to its normal rhythm. But Maria could feel eyes on her from every direction. Some of her co-workers looked impressed. Others seemed worried about what her outburst might mean for all of them. Jake approached her station as she returned to her vegetables. "Maria," he said quietly, "what the hell were you thinking?" "I was thinking he deserved better," she replied, not looking up from her work. "He's a general. You don't correct a general." "I wasn't correcting the general. I was correcting you." Jake opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it, because Maria was right, and they both knew it. The rest of Maria's shift passed in a blur. She chopped vegetables, cleaned prep tables, and helped with the dinner setup, all while trying not to think about her meeting with Colonel Patterson. By the time her shift ended at 4:30, she had convinced herself that she was about to be fired. She knocked on the colonel's office door exactly at 5 o'clock. "Enter." Maria stepped into the office, removing her hairnet and smoothing down her hair. Colonel Patterson was sitting behind his desk, reading from a file folder. "Sit down, Santos." Maria sat in the chair across from his desk, her hands folded in her lap. "Do you know why you're here?" the colonel asked. "Because I spoke out of turn during General Morrison's visit, sir." "That's part of it." Colonel Patterson closed the file and looked at her. "Do you have any idea what you did today?" "I probably cost you your reputation with the general, sir." "I'm sorry about that." Colonel Patterson was quiet for a long moment. Then, to Maria's complete surprise, he smiled. "Santos, General Morrison spent an hour and a half eating lunch in my dining room today. Do you know what we talked about?" "No, sir. We talked about leadership, about what it means to serve, about the difference between managing people and actually caring about them." The colonel leaned forward. "And we talked about you." Maria's heart skipped. "Sir, General Morrison was impressed by what you did. Very impressed. He said you showed more backbone and integrity in that moment than he's seen from some field-grade officers." Maria didn't know what to say to that. "He asked me about your background, your work history, your performance reviews. He wanted to know everything about the kitchen worker who had the courage to tell a 4-star general that his food wasn't good enough. I didn't mean any disrespect, sir. I know you didn't. That's what made it so remarkable. Colonel Patterson opened the file folder again. Santos, how far did you go in school? High school, sir. In El Salvador. Any college? No, sir. I came here when I was 19. I've been working to support my family. Colonel Patterson nodded. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this office, understood? Yes, sir. General Morrison is implementing a new program across the 18th Airborne Corps. It's designed to identify and develop leadership potential in unexpected places. People who show natural leadership qualities regardless of their background or current position. Maria wasn't sure where this was going, but it didn't sound like she was getting fired. He's asked me to recommend candidates from Fort Bragg. People who demonstrate integrity, courage, and genuine concern for others. People who might benefit from educational opportunities and leadership development. The colonel paused, studying Maria's face. Santos, would you be interested in earning your GED? Maria blinked. Sir, General Education Development Certificate. It's equivalent to a high school diploma in the United States. The base offers classes, and I can arrange for you to attend during work hours. Yes, sir. I would like that very much. And after that, if you're interested and you test well, there might be opportunities for college courses. The military has programs for civilian employees who show potential. Maria felt like the room was spinning. This morning she had been chopping onions and trying to make rent. Now she was talking about college. Sir, I don't understand. Why would you do this for me? Colonel Patterson smiled again. Santos, do you remember what General Morrison said about leadership? He said I showed backbone and integrity. That's right. But more than that, he said you care enough to risk your job to make sure someone got treated fairly. That's not something you can teach in a classroom. That's character. Maria felt tears starting to form in her eyes. I was just trying to do the right thing. I know. That's exactly the point. The colonel stood up. Report to the education office tomorrow morning at 0800. They'll get you started with placement testing and class schedules. You'll continue working in the kitchen, but we'll adjust your hours to accommodate school. Maria stood as well, still trying to process everything that had happened. Santos, Colonel Patterson said as she reached the door, what you did today took courage. Real courage. Don't ever let anyone tell you that kitchen work isn't important or that your opinion doesn't matter. Today you reminded a general and a colonel what service really means. As Maria walked across the base toward her small apartment, she thought about the phone call she would make to her mother that night. How could she explain that standing up for good meatloaf had somehow changed her entire life? She thought about General Morrison eating his lunch and talking about leadership. She thought about Colonel Patterson taking time to recognize potential in a kitchen worker. She thought about Jake and the other staff who had seen her speak truth to power and walk away with opportunities instead of unemployment. But mostly, she thought about tomorrow. For the first time since arriving in America, Maria Santos had a future that stretched beyond the next paycheck. All because she had refused to let a 4-star general eat bad food. Sometimes, she realized, the biggest changes come from the smallest acts of courage. Sometimes saying no to something wrong opens doors you never imagined existed. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Maria was already planning what she would study first. Maria arrived at the education office at exactly 8 o'clock the next morning, wearing her best civilian clothes and carrying a folder with her work papers. The building was unfamiliar to her. In 2 years at Fort Bragg, she had never had reason to visit the administrative side of the base. The receptionist, a friendly sergeant named Williams, looked up as Maria approached the desk. You must be Maria Santos, she said with a warm smile. Colonel Patterson called about you. You're here for placement testing. Yes, ma'am. Just call me Sergeant Williams. Have a seat, and I'll get you set up with Mrs. Rodriguez. She runs our civilian education program. Maria sat in the waiting area, looking around at the motivational posters and educational brochures that lined the walls. She had never imagined herself in a place like this. 3 days ago, her biggest worry was making sure the walk-in cooler was properly organized. Now she was taking tests that might determine her future. Maria, a middle-aged Hispanic woman, emerged from an office down the hall. She was professionally dressed, but had kind eyes that immediately put Maria at ease. I'm Elena Rodriguez. I understand you're interested in our GED program. Yes, ma'am. Please call me Elena. Let's go to my office and talk. Elena's office was small, but comfortable, with family photos on the desk and bookshelves lined with educational materials. She gestured for Maria to take a seat. So, tell me about yourself, Elena said. Colonel Patterson mentioned you work in the kitchen, but I'd like to hear your story. Maria found herself opening up in ways she rarely did. She talked about growing up in El Salvador, about coming to America with nothing but hope and determination. She described her work in the kitchen, sending money home to her mother, her dreams of maybe someday owning a small restaurant. What made you want to pursue your education now? Elena asked. Maria thought about how to explain what had happened the day before without sounding crazy. Yesterday, I met someone who made me realize that I might be capable of more than I thought, she said finally. Elena nodded. Sometimes it takes another person to help us see our own potential. Are you ready to take some placement tests? They'll help us figure out where to start. For the next 3 hours, Maria worked through mathematics, reading comprehension, and writing assessments. Some sections were easier than others. Her English reading was stronger than she had expected, thanks to years of reading instruction manuals and procedure books in the kitchen. Her math was weaker, but not impossibly so. When she finished, Elena scored the test while Maria waited nervously. Well, Elena said, looking up from the papers, you're going to do just fine. Your reading comprehension is actually at college level. Your writing needs some work with grammar and structure, but your ideas are clear. And your math skills are solid enough that we can build on them. Maria felt a surge of relief and excitement. How long will it take? She asked. That depends on how much time you can commit. If you can attend classes 4 mornings a week, I'd estimate 6 to 8 months for you to be ready for the GED exam. Colonel Patterson has arranged for you to have flexible scheduling with the kitchen. 8 months. Maria tried to imagine herself in 8 months, holding a high school equivalency certificate. When can I start? Monday. Classes run from 8 to 11, Monday through Thursday. You'll be back in the kitchen by noon. As Maria walked back to the kitchen for her afternoon shift, she felt like she was living someone else's life. Yesterday, she had been invisible. Today, she had a future. But when she arrived at the kitchen, she quickly realized that not everyone was happy about her sudden elevation. Well, look who's back, said Tommy Martinez, one of the line cooks. How was school, teacher's pet? Maria ignored him and went to her station, but she could feel the tension in the room. Several of her coworkers were watching her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to outright resentment. Jake, the head cook, approached her station during the afternoon prep. Maria, we need to talk. She followed him to the small office behind the kitchen where supplies were ordered and schedules were made. Look, Jake said, closing the door. I'm glad things worked out for you yesterday. I really am. But I need to know that you're still committed to this job. Of course I am, because I've got a kitchen to run, and I can't have people thinking they can just speak up whenever they disagree with how things are done. Maria studied Jake's face. She understood what he was really saying. He was worried that her actions yesterday had undermined his authority. Jake, I wasn't trying to make you look bad. I was trying to make sure the general got good food. I know that, but some of the staff, they're wondering if you think you're better than them now. Maria felt a pang of sadness. These people had been her colleagues, almost like family, for 2 years. She didn't want to lose that. I'm the same person I was yesterday, she said. I'm just going to school in the mornings. Are you? Because Colonel Patterson specifically requested that your schedule be adjusted. That's never happened for any of us. Maria realized that Jake was struggling with something larger than just her new opportunities. He was a good cook and a decent supervisor, but he had probably been working in military kitchens for years without anyone offering him educational advancement. Jake, why don't you apply for the GED program too? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Maria, I'm 43 years old. I got 3 kids and a mortgage. I can't start over now. You wouldn't be starting over. You'd be building on what you already know. Jake was quiet for a moment. It's different for you. You're young. You're smart. You impressed a general. Me? I'm just a cook who's been doing the same job for 15 years. Maria wanted to argue, but she recognized the pain in Jake's voice. It was the same pain she had felt for years, believing that her circumstances defined her limits. Jake, what if I talked to Elena Rodriguez about the program? What there were options for people with different schedules, different situations? You do that. Of course. You've been good to me here. You taught me how to manage inventory, how to handle the rush periods. You're already a leader. That afternoon, Maria found herself in an unexpected position. During her break, she called Elena Rodriguez and asked about adult education options for working parents with full-time schedules. We do have evening classes, Elena explained, and weekend workshops. It's a longer path, but it's definitely possible. Why do you ask? I have a supervisor who might be interested, but he has family obligations. Have him call me. We can work something out. When Maria told Jake about the evening classes, she saw something change in his expression. It wasn't quite hope yet, but it was the possibility of hope. You really think I could do it? He asked. I think you'd be surprised by what you can do. Over the next few days, word spread through the kitchen about Maria's new opportunities. The reactions were mixed. Some co-workers were genuinely supportive. Carmen, the morning prep cook, told her she was proud of her for speaking up. A few of the younger staff asked about the education program, but others were less enthusiastic. Tommy Martinez continued his snide comments about teacher's pet and brown-nosing. A couple of the dishwashers seemed to think that Maria was abandoning her roots, trying to be something she wasn't. Maria tried not to let the negativity affect her, but it hurt. These people had been her workplace family for 2 years. She had shared breaks with them, covered shifts when they were sick, celebrated their children's birthdays, and graduations. On Friday afternoon, as Maria was finishing her prep work for the weekend crew, Colonel Patterson appeared in the kitchen. This was only his second visit since the incident with General Morrison. Santos, could I see you for a moment? Maria followed the colonel to a quiet corner of the kitchen. How are things going with the education program? Very well, sir. I start classes on Monday. Good. I wanted to let you know that General Morrison will be visiting the base again next month. He specifically asked to speak with you. Maria's stomach fluttered. Sir, he's documenting his leadership development initiative for the Pentagon. Your story is going to be part of his presentation. My story? Maria, do you understand what you've become? You're proof that leadership potential exists at every level of an organization. That a person's rank or position doesn't determine their value or their ability to contribute. Maria wasn't sure how she felt about becoming an example for other people. It seemed surreal. Sir, what if I disappoint him? What if the classes are too hard? Or I don't test well? Colonel Patterson smiled. Santos, you stood up to a 4-star general because you believed in doing the right thing. I'm not worried about you handling some textbooks. That evening, Maria sat in her small apartment, thinking about the week that had changed her life. She had gone from invisible to visible, from voiceless to heard, from trapped to free. But she was beginning to understand that with opportunity came responsibility. She called her mother in El Salvador, as she did every Friday. Mija, her mother said in Spanish, you sound different. What's happening? Maria told her about the general, about the education program, about the changes that were coming. Maria, her mother said, and Maria could hear tears in her voice. I always knew you were meant for more than chopping vegetables. Manga, I'm scared. Scared of what? What if I fail? What if I'm not as smart as they think I am? Maria, listen to me. You came to a foreign country when you were 19 years old. You learned a new language, found work, sent money home to help your family. You survived and succeeded in ways that most people couldn't imagine. You think some books are going to be harder than that? Maria smiled for the first time all week. Her mother was right. She had already overcome challenges that would have broken other people. And Mija, her mother, continued. Remember why you spoke up to that general. Not because you wanted something for yourself, but because you wanted things to be right. Keep that heart, and you'll be fine. That weekend, Maria spent time preparing for a new life. She organized her schedule, bought notebooks and pencils, and read through the orientation materials Elena had given her. But she also spent Saturday morning in the kitchen, volunteering to help with weekend meal prep. She wasn't abandoning her roots. She was building on them. On Saturday afternoon, Jake approached her while she was cleaning equipment. "Maria, I called that lady you told me about. Elena Rodriguez." "Yeah? What did she say?" "She's going to meet with me next week about evening classes. She thinks I could have my GED in 18 months if I work at it." Maria felt a surge of genuine happiness. "Jake, that's wonderful. She said you recommended me specifically? Said you told her I was already a leader." "You are." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Maria, I owe you an apology. When this all started, I was jealous. I thought you were getting special treatment because you got lucky with that general. And now I think you made your own luck. You saw an opportunity to do the right thing, and you took it. That takes guts." Maria nodded. "Jake, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "When you saw me serving bad food to General Morrison, why didn't you say something?" Jake thought about it. "I guess I was too scared. Scared of making waves, scared of getting in trouble. I was thinking about protecting my job instead of doing my job." "That's the difference," Maria said. "I wasn't thinking about my job at all. I was thinking about what was right." "Yeah," Jake said slowly. "I'm beginning to understand that." On Sunday evening, Maria sat at her small kitchen table, preparing for her first day of classes. She had notebooks organized by subject, pens that worked properly, and a thermos for coffee during breaks. But more than the supplies, she had something else, clarity about why she was doing this. She wasn't pursuing education to escape her life or to prove she was better than anyone else. She was doing it because that moment with General Morrison had shown her that her voice mattered, that her perspective had value, that she could contribute in ways she had never imagined. Tomorrow would be her first day of school in America. At 23, she was starting over, building on a foundation of courage that she hadn't even known she possessed. As she prepared for bed, Maria thought about General Morrison's words. That's what we're supposed to be teaching our soldiers. Leadership, integrity, the courage to speak up when something is wrong. She was about to learn that these weren't just military values. They were life values, and they would serve her well in the challenges ahead. Monday morning couldn't come soon enough. Maria's first day of classes arrived with unseasonably cold October weather. She walked across the base at 7:30 in the morning, her breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. Her backpack, purchased over the weekend, felt strange and light on her shoulders. She couldn't remember the last time she had carried books instead of kitchen supplies. The education building was already buzzing with activity when she arrived. Maria followed the signs to room 15, where her morning GED prep class would meet. She paused outside the door, taking a deep breath before entering. The classroom held about 15 students, and Maria was relieved to see that she wasn't the only civilian employee. There were several other base workers, a few military spouses, and even 2 young soldiers who were working on their education during off-duty time. "Good morning, everyone," said a tall, energetic woman as she entered the room. "I'm Sarah Chun, and I'll be your instructor for the next few months. Let's start by introducing ourselves." As they went around the room, Maria learned that her classmates came from incredibly diverse backgrounds. There was David, a mechanic who had dropped out of high school to help support his family after his father died. Jennifer was a military wife who had moved around too much to finish school in any one place. Carlos was a young soldier who wanted to go to college after his enlistment ended. When it was Maria's turn, she kept her introduction simple. "I'm Maria Santos. I work in the base kitchen, and I'm here because I want to prove to myself that I can learn new things." Sarah Chun nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the right attitude, Maria." The first week of classes was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Maria discovered that she was stronger in some areas than she had expected and weaker in others. Her reading comprehension was excellent, thanks to years of reading procedure manuals and safety regulations in both English and Spanish. Her writing skills needed work, but she had good instincts for organizing her thoughts. Mathematics was her biggest challenge. She could handle basic arithmetic and even some algebra, but the more complex problem-solving required a different kind of thinking than she was used to. "Don't get discouraged," Sarah told her after class on Wednesday. "Math is like cooking. You need to understand the basic techniques before you can create something complex." I never thought of it that way. Think about it. When you're cooking for hundreds of people, you're constantly scaling recipes, calculating cooking times, adjusting proportions. You're already doing math. We just need to help you recognize it. That afternoon, Maria returned to the kitchen with a new perspective on her work. As she prepared vegetables for dinner service, she found herself paying attention to the mathematical aspects of cooking that she had always taken for granted. Converting recipe measurements, calculating portions, timing multiple dishes to finish simultaneously, it was all applied mathematics. "You're quiet today," Carmen observed as they worked side by side. "Just thinking about something my teacher said. How are the classes going?" "Harder than I expected, but not impossible." Carmen smiled. "You know, watching you do this has got me thinking. My youngest daughter is going to graduate high school next year, and I want to be able to help her with college applications. Maybe I should look into some classes myself." This was becoming a pattern. Maria's decision to pursue education was inspiring others to consider their own possibilities. Jake had enrolled in evening GED classes and was already talking about what he might study next. Two of the younger kitchen staff had asked Elena Rodriguez about skills training programs. But not everyone was supportive. Tommy Martinez had escalated his resentment, making sarcastic comments about college girl and questioning whether Maria was still committed to her kitchen duties. The situation came to a head on Friday afternoon. Maria was rushing to finish her prep work before leaving for the day when Tommy deliberately bumped into her, causing her to spill a container of diced onions. "Oops," he said with obvious insincerity. "Guess your fancy education doesn't make you less clumsy." Maria looked at the onions scattered across the floor, then at Tommy's smirking face. She felt her temper rising, but forced herself to stay calm. "Tommy, what's your problem with me going to school?" "My problem is that some of us have to do the real work while you get special privileges. I'm still doing my job. I've never missed a shift or left work undone. For now. But how long before you think you're too good for this place?" Maria knelt down and began collecting the spilled onions. "Tommy, I'll never think I'm too good for this place. This job taught me discipline and teamwork and the value of hard work. Why would I be ashamed of that?" Tommy seemed taken aback by her calm response. He had clearly expected an argument. "Besides," Maria continued as she stood up, "nobody's stopping you from pursuing your own goals. What do you want to do with your life?" I'm fine doing what I'm doing. Are you? Because you seem pretty angry about something." Tommy opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. Maria could see conflict in his expression. "Look," she said quietly, "if you ever want to talk about educational programs or training opportunities, I'm happy to share what I've learned. We don't have to be in competition with each other." Tommy mumbled something and walked away, but Maria noticed that his hostility seemed to have deflated somewhat. The following Monday brought Maria's first major academic challenge. Sarah Chun announced that they would be working on persuasive essays, and that each student would need to choose a topic they cared deeply about. "The best writing comes from personal conviction," Sarah explained. "Choose something that matters to you, research it thoroughly, and make your case." That evening, Maria sat in her apartment trying to decide what to write about. She considered topics like immigration policy, workers' rights, or educational access. But as she thought about her recent experiences, another subject kept coming to mind: the importance of recognizing leadership potential at all levels of an organization. Her essay began to take shape over several days. She wrote about her observations in the kitchen, watching young soldiers struggle with homesickness and older sergeants manage complex logistics. She wrote about the difference between authority and leadership, between commanding and inspiring. "Leadership isn't about rank or position," she wrote in her conclusion. "It's about caring enough to speak up when something is wrong and having the courage to act on your convictions. Every person in an organization, regardless of their role, has the potential to lead." When Sarah returned the essays the following week, Maria was nervous. Writing had always been her weakest subject, and she worried that her ideas hadn't translated well to paper. But Sarah's comments were overwhelmingly positive. Maria, this is exceptional work. Your arguments are clear, your examples are compelling, and your voice is authentic. Have you considered that writing might be one of your strengths? Maria stared at the paper, covered with Sarah's encouraging comments and suggestions for improvement. I never thought of myself as a writer. Neither did most writers at first. But you have something important to say, and you're learning to say it effectively. That's what writing is about. That afternoon, Maria was still thinking about Sarah's comments when Colonel Patterson appeared in the kitchen. Santos, could I have a word? They stepped outside into the cool afternoon air. I have some news, the colonel said. General Morrison has moved up his visit. He'll be here next week, and he wants to interview you for his leadership development presentation. Interview me about your experiences, your educational progress, your perspectives on leadership at different levels. It's going to be filmed for use at leadership conferences across the military. Maria felt a familiar flutter of nervousness. Sir, what if I say something wrong? Maria, you've never said anything wrong. That's your strength. You speak from conviction and experience. That's exactly what he wants to capture. What should I prepare? Just be yourself. Be ready to talk about what you've learned, both in the kitchen and in the classroom. And be prepared to explain why you think leadership development programs like this one matter. That evening, Maria called her mother to tell her about the upcoming interview. Mija, you're going to be on television? Not television, Mama. It's for military training programs. Still, people will see you, hear your story. I'm so proud of you. I'm nervous, Mama. What if I don't represent our family well? Maria, listen to me. You represent our family every day by working hard, being honest, and helping others. That's all anyone can ask. The next few days passed quickly. Maria continued her classes and her kitchen work, but she found herself thinking constantly about the interview. What would General Morrison ask? What message did she want to convey? On Wednesday, Sarah Chun asked her to stay after class. Maria, I've been reading your essay again, and I think you should consider submitting it to some scholarship competitions. Scholarships. There are several programs specifically for adult learners and first-generation college students. Your essay demonstrates exactly the kind of leadership and academic potential they're looking for. Maria felt overwhelmed. 3 weeks ago, she had been invisible. Now, she was preparing for an interview with a general and considering college scholarships. Sarah, I'm not even close to having my GED yet. No, but you will have it. And when you do, you should be ready for the next step. These applications take time, and the deadlines are months away. Think about it. That afternoon, Maria was preparing vegetables when Jake approached her station. Maria, I wanted you to know something. I talked to Elena Rodriguez about evening classes, and I'm starting next month. Jake, that's wonderful. But that's not all. I've been thinking about what you said about leadership coming from caring enough to speak up. So I talked to Colonel Patterson about implementing some changes in the kitchen. What kind of changes? Better training for new staff, cross-training so people could develop multiple skills, maybe even a mentorship program where experienced workers help newer ones advance. Maria smiled. That sounds amazing. The colonel loved the ideas. He said it showed initiative and forward thinking. He's putting me in for a promotion to assistant food service manager. Maria felt genuine joy for Jake's success. This was what she had hoped for when she first encouraged him to pursue education. Not just personal advancement, but the confidence to become a leader. There's something else, Jake continued. The colonel asked if I had any recommendations for my replacement as head cook. I recommended you. Maria nearly dropped her knife. Me? You know this kitchen better than anyone. You understand food safety, inventory management, staff coordination. And you've proven that you care about quality and standards. But I don't have experience supervising people. Maria, you've been supervising people since the day you got here. You just did it by example instead of authority. That's the best kind of leadership. That evening, Maria sat in her apartment trying to process everything that was happening. In 3 weeks, she had gone from chopping vegetables to considering college scholarships and potential promotions. It felt surreal, but as she thought about it, she realized that the external changes were really just reflections of an internal transformation. She was the same person who had worked in the kitchen for 2 years, but now she saw herself differently. She had found her voice, discovered her capabilities, and learned to believe in her own potential. The interview with General Morrison was just days away. Whatever he asked, whatever message he wanted her to convey, Maria knew what her answer would be. Leadership wasn't about rank or position or special privileges. It was about recognizing that every person has value, every voice matters, and every individual has the potential to make a difference. She had learned that lesson in the most unlikely place, standing over a tray of meatloaf, refusing to let a 4-star general eat food that wasn't good enough. Now, she was ready to share that lesson with the world. The morning of General Morrison's visit, Maria arrived at the base earlier than usual. She had spent extra time getting ready, choosing her best civilian clothes, and reviewing the questions she thought he might ask. But underneath her careful preparation, she felt the same nervous energy she had experienced during their first encounter. Colonel Patterson had arranged for the interview to take place in the conference room adjacent to his office. It was a formal space with a long polished table and official photographs lining the walls. A small camera crew had set up their equipment the night before. At exactly 9 o'clock, General Morrison arrived with his aide and a woman Maria didn't recognize. "Good morning, Maria," the general said, extending his hand. "I'd like you to meet Dr. Susan Walsh from the Pentagon's Human Resources Development Office. She's helping me document this leadership initiative." Dr. Walsh was a professional woman in her 50s with intelligent eyes and a warm smile. "Maria, I've heard remarkable things about you. I'm looking forward to our conversation." As they settled around the conference table, Maria noticed that General Morrison looked different than she remembered. Less intimidating, more approachable. He was still clearly a man of significant authority, but there was something almost grandfatherly in his manner. "Maria," General Morrison began, "I want you to know that this interview is going to be used to train military leaders about recognizing and developing talent at all levels of an organization. Your story has become a case study in what we call emergent leadership. But before we start recording, I want to make sure you're comfortable with this. I'm a little nervous, sir, but I understand the importance of what you're doing." "Good. Remember, there are no wrong answers here. We want to hear about your experiences in your own words." Dr. Walsh activated the camera, and the formal interview began. "Maria," General Morrison said, "let's start with that day in the kitchen. Walk me through what you were thinking when you decided to speak up about my lunch." Maria took a deep breath. "Sir, I wasn't really thinking about the consequences. I was just watching you talk about eating the same food as your soldiers, about respect and service, and then I saw that you were about to get the worst version of that food. It seemed wrong." "What do you mean by the worst version?" "The meatloaf was dried out from sitting at the bottom of the pan. The potatoes had been under heat lamps too long. That's not what our soldiers were eating. If you really wanted to experience their meal, you deserved the same quality food they were getting." Dr. Walsh leaned forward. "Maria, you risked your job to make that point. What motivated you to take that risk?" Maria thought carefully before answering. "I think it was respect, ma'am. Not just respect for the general's rank, but respect for what he was trying to do. He was making a point about leadership, about not thinking you're better than the people you serve. If I'd stayed quiet and let him eat bad food, I would have been undermining that message." General Morrison nodded. "That's exactly right. You understood the principle better than some of my own staff officers. Now, tell me about your educational progress. What has that experience been like?" "It's been challenging, sir, but also exciting. I'm learning things about myself that I never knew. My instructor told me that I might be a good writer, which is something I never would have imagined." "What are you writing about?" "Actually, sir, I wrote an essay about leadership, about how it comes from caring enough to speak up when something is wrong, regardless of your position in an organization." Dr. Walsh exchanged a meaningful look with General Morrison. "Maria, could you elaborate on that? How do you define leadership?" Maria felt more confident now. This was something she had thought deeply about over the past month. "I used to think leadership was about giving orders, and making decisions. But I've learned that real leadership is about influence and inspiration. It's about making the people around you better, not just making them do what you want. Can you give me an example? In our kitchen, we have a head cook named Jake who's been there for 15 years. He's good at his job, but he never thought of himself as a leader. After I started going to school, he decided to pursue his GED too. But more than that, he started proposing improvements to how we train new staff and develop our team. Now he's getting promoted to assistant food service manager. And you think your actions influence that? Not my actions, sir. My example. I showed him that it was possible to grow and change even when you think you're stuck where you are. But he did the hard work himself. General Morrison smiled. That's a perfect example of leadership multiplication. One person's growth inspiring others to pursue their own development. Now, Maria, I understand you've been recommended for a promotion yourself. Yes, sir. To head cook when Jake moves up. How do you feel about that? Honored, sir, but also responsible. I know that people will be watching to see if I can live up to the opportunity I've been given. Dr. Walsh consulted her notes. Maria, let's talk about the broader implications of your story. What do you think organizations miss when they don't recognize leadership potential in unexpected places? This was the question Maria had been hoping for, the one that got to the heart of what she had learned. They miss talent, ma'am. They miss different perspectives. They miss the insights that come from people who do the actual work every day. But most importantly, they miss the chance to inspire people to be their best selves. Explain what you mean by different perspectives. Well, when I spoke up about General Morrison's lunch, I wasn't thinking like a supervisor or a manager. I was thinking like someone who cares about the quality of the food we serve. That's a different viewpoint than someone who's worried about protocols or procedures. General Morrison nodded. That's exactly right. The further you get from the actual work, the easier it is to lose sight of what really matters. What advice would you give to senior leaders about finding and developing talent like yours? Maria considered this carefully. Sir, I think leaders need to pay attention to how people work, not just what they produce. Look for people who care about quality, who help their coworkers, who speak up when something isn't right, and then create opportunities for those people to grow. What kind of opportunities? Education, obviously, but also chances to take on new responsibilities, to contribute ideas, to mentor others. People need to see a path forward, not just a way to stay where they are. Dr. Walsh leaned back in her chair. Maria, you've been through a remarkable transformation in just a few weeks. What has surprised you most about this experience? How much I enjoy learning, ma'am. I always thought of myself as someone who worked with her hands, not her mind. But I'm discovering that I like solving problems, understanding new concepts, expressing ideas in writing. It's like I've been using only part of myself my whole life. And what's been the most challenging aspect? The mathematics, Maria said with a smile. But also the social dynamics. Some people have been supportive, but others seem to resent my opportunities. I've had to learn how to handle that without becoming defensive or bitter. General Morrison looked interested. How have you handled it? By trying to create opportunities for others, sir. When people complain that I'm getting special treatment, I offer to help them find their own paths forward. Usually, their anger isn't really about me. It's about feeling stuck or overlooked themselves. That's very mature insight, Dr. Walsh observed. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Maria paused. A month ago, she couldn't have imagined herself anywhere beyond the kitchen. Now the possibilities seemed limitless. I'd like to finish my GED and go to college, ma'am. Maybe study business management or education. I think I'd like to help other people discover their own potential, the way Colonel Patterson and my teachers have helped me. Any particular field? I've been thinking about workforce development or maybe educational counseling for adult learners. I want to work with people who think they don't have options. General Morrison smiled broadly. Maria, that's exactly the kind of career path this program is designed to support. Dr. Walsh, would you tell Maria about the scholarship opportunities? Dr. Walsh opened a folder she had brought with her. Maria, based on your academic progress and leadership potential, you're eligible for several programs that provide full tuition support for college. The military has partnerships with universities specifically for civilian employees who show exceptional promise. Maria felt her heart racing. Full tuition, plus a living allowance while you're in school. In return, you'd commit to working in military-connected positions for a few years after graduation, helping develop programs like the one that helped you. That's incredible. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it, General Morrison said. Take time to think about it. Discuss it with your family. But, Maria, I want you to understand something important. This isn't charity. This is an investment in someone who has already proven their value. Dr. Walsh handed her several brochures. These are programs at universities within driving distance of Fort Bragg. You could continue working part-time while you study, maintaining your connection to the base community. As the formal interview concluded, General Morrison asked the camera crew to stop recording. Maria, he said, I want to tell you something off the record. In 32 years of military service, I met a lot of people with potential, but I've rarely met someone who understands leadership as naturally as you do. Don't let anyone convince you that you're not qualified for whatever you want to pursue. Thank you, sir. That means everything to me. There's one more thing. I've spoken with Colonel Patterson about creating a formal mentorship program on this base, pairing senior staff with junior employees who show leadership potential. Would you be interested in being part of the pilot program, both as a mentor and as someone being mentored? Absolutely, sir. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Walsh handed Maria her business card. Maria, I'll be following your progress. If you have questions about the scholarship programs, or if you need references for applications, please don't hesitate to contact me. After they left, Maria sat alone in the conference room for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. A month ago, she had been invisible. Now she was being interviewed for a Pentagon training program and offered full scholarships to college. But more than the opportunities, she was struck by something General Morrison had said about understanding leadership naturally. She thought about her coworkers, about Jake's promotion, and Carmen's interest in education. She thought about Tommy Martinez, who had been less hostile lately, and had even asked her a few questions about the GED program. Leadership wasn't something that had been done to her or for her. It was something that had been awakened in her, something that had always been there waiting for the right opportunity to emerge. That afternoon, she returned to the kitchen with a new understanding of her role. She wasn't just a kitchen worker who was going to school. She was a leader in training, someone with the potential to create positive change wherever she went. As she began her prep work for dinner service, Jake approached her station. How did the interview go? Better than I could have imagined, Maria replied. Jake, they offer me scholarship programs for college. Maria, that's fantastic. What are you going to study? I'm thinking about workforce development or educational counseling. I want to help other people find opportunities like the ones I've been given. Jake nodded approvingly. That makes perfect sense. You're good at seeing potential in people. Jake, I want to ask you something. When I get promoted to head cook, I'm going to need someone I can trust to help train new staff and maintain our standards. Are you interested in developing a formal training program? What do you have in mind? Something that goes beyond just teaching people how to do their current jobs. Something that helps them understand how their work connects to the bigger mission and how they can grow within the organization. Jake's eyes lit up. Like a leadership development program for kitchen staff? Exactly. What do you think? I think you're already thinking like a manager. And I think this kitchen is lucky to have you. That evening, Maria called her mother with updates about the interview and the scholarship opportunities. Mija, her mother said, I need to tell you something. Your cousin Elena is graduating from high school next year, and she's been talking about coming to the United States for college. That's wonderful, Mama. I told her about what you're doing, about the opportunities you've found. She wants to know if you could help her understand how the system works here. Maria smiled. The circle was already beginning to expand. Of course, Mama. Tell her to call me. I'll share everything I've learned. As she hung up the phone, Maria realized that her story was just beginning. The girl who had spoken up about a general's lunch had discovered something much larger than educational opportunities or career advancement. She had discovered her purpose, to help others find their own voices, their own potential, their own paths to leadership. And that discovery would change not just her life, but the lives of everyone she would touch in the years to come. 6 months later, Maria stood in her cap and gown at the Fort Bragg Community Center, waiting for her name to be called. The GED graduation ceremony was small, but meaningful, with about 30 adult learners receiving their certificates. In the audience, she could see Colonel Patterson, Jake, Carmen, and several other colleagues from the kitchen. Even Tommy Martinez had come, though he tried to look nonchalant about it. Maria Santos, the announcer, called. As Maria walked across the stage to receive her certificate, she thought about how much had changed since that day in October when General Morrison first visited the kitchen. She was no longer the invisible prep cook who arrived before dawn and left after dinner service. She was the head cook of the busiest military dining facility on Fort Bragg, a college student with a full scholarship, and a mentor to 3 other base employees who were pursuing their own educational goals. But the most significant change wasn't in her title or her opportunities. It was in her understanding of what was possible. "Congratulations, Maria," said Dr. Rodriguez, the base education director, as she handed over the diploma. "I understand you're starting at North Carolina State University in the fall?" "Yes, ma'am. Double majoring in business administration and adult education." "That's ambitious. Are you ready for the challenge?" Maria smiled. "I've learned that I'm ready for more challenges than I ever imagined." After the ceremony, Maria's colleagues gathered around her for pictures and congratulations. Jake, now the assistant food service manager, had brought a cake decorated with a graduation cap made of frosting. "Speech," called out Carmen, who had enrolled in evening classes after watching Maria's progress. "I'm not good at speeches," Maria protested. "You're better than you think," said Tommy Martinez, speaking up from the back of the group. "Go on, say something." Maria looked around at these people who had become more than co-workers. They had become a community of learners, supporting each other through challenges and celebrating each other's successes. 6 months ago, she began, "I thought my life was pretty much set. I had a job I was good at, I was supporting my family, and I figured that was enough. But I learned something important. There's a big difference between being satisfied and being fulfilled." She paused, gathering her thoughts. When General Morrison came to our kitchen that day, he wasn't just talking about eating the same food as the soldiers. He was talking about the responsibility we all have to help each other become our best selves. And that's what this community has done for me. Maria gestured toward Jake. "Jake taught me that it's never too late to pursue your goals. He started his GED at 43 and is now planning to study hospitality management." She turned to Carmen. "Carmen showed me that learning isn't just about advancing your own career. It's about being able to help your children with their education, about being an example in your family." She even looked toward Tommy. "And Tommy taught me that sometimes people resist change not because they don't want to grow, but because they're afraid they've missed their chance." Tommy starts his welding certification program next month. Tommy looked embarrassed, but pleased by the recognition. "What I want everyone to understand," Maria continued, "is that none of us did this alone. We succeeded because we supported each other, because we created an environment where growth was valued and encouraged. That's what real leadership looks like." Colonel Patterson stepped forward as the applause died down. "Maria, I have some news to share with everyone. The leadership development program that started with your story has now been implemented across 15 military installations. General Morrison's presentation featuring your interview has been viewed by over 50,000 military leaders." Maria felt a surge of pride mixed with humility. "That's incredible, sir. But there's more. The Pentagon has asked Dr. Walsh to develop a formal curriculum based on the principles your story illustrates. They want to create a standardized program for identifying and developing leadership potential at all organizational levels." "What does that mean?" "It means your refusal to let a general eat bad meatloaf has influenced military leadership training across the entire Department of Defense." The group erupted in cheers and applause. Maria felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Colonel Patterson was describing. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Maria found herself alone with Jake in the kitchen where it all began. They were cleaning up after the reception, falling naturally into the rhythms of work they had shared for so long. "Maria," Jake said as he wiped down the prep tables, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever regret speaking up that day? Your life would have been a lot simpler if you had just kept quiet." Maria thought about the question as she organized the utensils. "Jake, do you know what I regret?" "What?" "I regret all the times before that day when I saw something wrong and didn't speak up. All the times I could have suggested improvements or helped someone solve a problem, but I stayed silent because I thought it wasn't my place." "But you were protecting yourself." "That's natural." "Maybe, but I was also selling myself short. And I was selling everyone around me short too. When we don't use our voices, we're not just limiting ourselves. We're limiting what our whole community can achieve." Jake nodded slowly. "I never thought of it that way." That's what General Morrison understood. He knew that the best ideas don't always come from the people with the highest rank. Sometimes they come from the people doing the actual work, the people who see problems and opportunities that leaders miss. As they finished cleaning, Maria thought about the conversation she'd had with Dr. Walsh the week before. The Pentagon was interested in having Maria speak at leadership conferences while she was in college, sharing her perspective on developing talent at all organizational levels. "Jake, I want to run an idea by you." "Sure." Dr. Walsh asked if I'd be interested in speaking at military conferences about leadership development. I said yes, but I want to propose something additional. "What's that?" "I want to create a program where they bring in panels of people like us, the cooks, the mechanics, the clerks, the people who make organizations actually function. Let the leaders hear directly from the people they're trying to develop." Jake's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. Leaders talking to leaders about leadership, instead of just talking about the people they lead." "Exactly. Real leadership development has to be a conversation, not a lecture." Over the summer, as Maria prepared to start college, she worked on developing this idea. With support from Dr. Walsh and Colonel Patterson, she created a proposal for frontline leadership forums, events where senior leaders could engage directly with employees at all levels to discuss leadership challenges and opportunities. The first pilot forum was scheduled for August, right before Maria started her freshman year at NC State. Representatives from 5 different military installations would participate, including general officers, middle managers, and frontline workers. 2 days before the forum, Maria received a call that both excited and intimidated her. "Maria, this is Dr. Walsh. I have some news that might interest you." "Yes, ma'am." "General Morrison has been promoted. He's now a 4-star general in charge of Army personnel development for the entire service. And he wants your Frontline Leadership Forum concept to be part of his signature initiative." Maria sat down hard in her chair. "What does that mean?" "It means this program could be implemented Army-wide, potentially affecting hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilian employees. It means your idea could become policy." That evening, Maria called her mother to share the news. "Mija," her mother said in Spanish, "when you were little, you always asked questions. You wanted to know why things worked the way they did, whether there might be a better way to do them. Your teachers said you had a curious mind. I remember, Mama, I always wondered what would happen if you found a place where that curiosity was valued instead of discouraged. Now I know." The Frontline Leadership Forum exceeded everyone's expectations. Maria moderated a panel discussion between 2 generals, 3 colonels, and 6 frontline workers from various military installations. The conversation was frank, sometimes challenging, but ultimately productive. One of the most powerful moments came when Sergeant Lisa Chun, a supply clerk from Fort Hood, directly challenged a colonel about promotion criteria. "Sir, with respect, the current system promotes people who look good on paper, not necessarily people who make things work better. How do we change that?" Instead of being defensive, Colonel Martinez leaned forward with genuine interest. "Sergeant Chun, give me a specific example. What would better promotion criteria look like?" The conversation that followed led to concrete proposals for revising evaluation standards to include demonstrated leadership impact, not just technical competence and time in service. Maria watched the exchange with deep satisfaction. This was what she had envisioned. Honest dialogue between people at different levels of an organization, focused on making things better for everyone. After the forum, General Morrison pulled Maria aside. Maria, I want to offer you something. A position as a civilian advisor to the Army Personnel Development Office. You'd work part-time while finishing your degree, helping to design and implement leadership development programs based on the principles you've championed. General, that's an incredible honor. But I want to finish my education first, understand the theory behind what I've been doing intuitively. That's exactly why I want you on my team. You understand that practical experience and theoretical knowledge need to work together. Take your time, finish your degree. The offer will be waiting when you're ready. As Maria drove back to Fort Bragg that evening, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 18 months ago, she had been a kitchen worker, sending money to her mother and dreaming of maybe someday owning a small restaurant. Now she was preparing to study business and education at one of the country's top universities, with a job offer from the Pentagon waiting for her after graduation. But the external changes, dramatic as they were, weren't the most important part of her transformation. The real change was internal. The recognition that her voice mattered, that her perspective had value, that she could contribute to solving problems much larger than kitchen operations. That recognition had rippled out in ways she never could have imagined. Jake was pursuing his own education and developing into a confident manager. Carmen was helping her daughter navigate college applications while taking night classes herself. Tommy had discovered a passion for welding and was planning to open his own shop after completing his certification. The kitchen where it all started now had a formal mentorship program, with experienced workers helping newcomers not just learn their jobs, but understand their potential for growth. 3 other dining facilities on base had requested similar programs. But perhaps most importantly, the conversation about leadership had changed. Instead of seeing leadership as something that only happened at the top of an organization, people were beginning to understand it as something that could emerge at any level, in any situation, whenever someone cared enough to speak up for what was right. On her last day as a full-time kitchen employee, Maria stood in the prep area where she had spent so many hours chopping vegetables and thinking about her limited future. Now the space looked different to her, not like a dead-end job, but like a place where she had learned about teamwork, quality, service, and the dignity of honest work. Colonel Patterson stopped by for an informal farewell. Maria, I hope you know what you've accomplished here. You haven't just changed your own life. You've changed how this entire base thinks about developing people. Sir, I hope I've shown that potential exists everywhere. We just have to be willing to recognize it and nurture it. That's exactly what you've shown. And, Maria, I want you to know that we're not losing you. You're graduating to a bigger mission, but you'll always be part of this community. As Maria packed up her personal items from her locker, she found a card signed by everyone in the kitchen staff. Inside, Jake had written, "Thank you for showing us that speaking up isn't about being brave. It's about caring enough to make things better." That evening, Maria sat in her apartment reviewing the course materials for her first semester at NC State. Business management, introduction to educational psychology, college writing, statistics. Subjects that would have intimidated her 2 years ago now felt like exciting challenges. Her phone rang. It was her cousin Elena calling from El Salvador. "Maria, I got accepted to the university program you told me about. I'm coming to North Carolina next year." "Elena, that's wonderful. I can help you navigate everything, the applications, the housing, the academic support services." "Maria, can I ask you something? I'm nervous about coming to a new country, starting over. How did you find the courage to take such big risks?"